This is a daughter podcast where dads come to talk, think, and thrive with your hosts, Oscar and Blandon. Our mission is to cultivate a community of strong, mindful, and present fathers.
We want to curate honest conversations with all men, but especially those who have the honor of raising daughters.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Daughter Podcast. Oscar here with Blandon on the other side. What's up, man? How's it going?
Man, it's going good. So we had somewhat of an eventful weekend. My youngest was not feeling well, so we did have to take her to the urgent care. But all of that is sorted out, and we're really blessed and grateful for medical professionals we have here in Houston, Texas, at Texas Children's, always willing to help and assist and make sure that our kids are doing well and are on the mend. So yeah.
So she's feeling better.
She is feeling better. Yeah,
All right.
she's doing better. Yeah.
Good. Prior to that,
Yeah.
what's been going on in the Blandon household? What topics of discussion have been going on in your house?
So lots of topics to discuss in the house, but a lot of times me and the girls really have our quality conversations in the car. They're very much like their mother that way. Me and my wife, when we were first dating and then even first married, a lot of the conversations we had in the car. We didn't have like a coffee house like most people are inside the house. We would drive and then we would just talk. So she loves driving, and so they're her girls, and so it's the same thing. So they have a lot to talk about in the car. The discussion of late, though, has been about accountability, taking responsibility for their own actions and their consequences of those actions, and then not blame shifting, right? Not allowing your behaviors and emotions to be held hostage by another person, but really understanding that they control their behavior and that nobody can make them do anything that they don't want to do, that they don't choose to do. And so that's the conversation I've been having a lot with the girls, especially surrounding school. So my oldest has recently told me that there is one of her classmates. They call them scholars at their school, which I really love, but one of her classmates has been kind of dubbed the classroom bully, in the class in second grade. And she kind of tells me about some of the antics, some of the behavior he takes. And I think I've said this before. In their class, they're on like this color coded system. They every day they reset to green. They start out at green and then either they go up or down the scale. And my oldest and my youngest this week both got clipped up. They got clipped up to purple, which is right under pink, which pink is really good. And my oldest was saying how this classmate, this scholar, is constantly getting clipped down to either yellow or red, which is bad. And based on his actions, him making fun of people, doing these things. And then we just kind of had a discussion about that. I was like, but do you see his actions have now marked him? Now he is identified by you and probably other classmates and maybe even teachers as a bully or as this disruptive element.
Right.
And we can think back into his past or what's going on in his house, like maybe the person is having a bad situation at home currently, but people don't see that. People don't see what's happening at your house. They see what's happening with them and how you're interacting and how you're treating others, and ultimately he has to take responsibility for that. I know in this world of being over therapized, like going to therapy a lot, this over use of therapy language, we don't want to put the onus on the person, but that's where it's at. That's where it starts. Like, I have to take responsibility for how I behave in this world, what I say, what I do. And that's another thing that I'm teaching the girls,
Is that not what therapy's for? Isn't it like therapy's supposed to get you to where you take care of yourself?
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are like, you don't hear that though, right? You hear that this person in their life is a narcissist and their parents are toxic, and the exes are gaslighting them
Yeah.
and this, that, and the third. But it's like you chose all these people. If you have a slew of exes who are all the same, you chose all of them, and you
Yeah.
chose to behave a certain way with them, right? So yeah, I don't. I really don't know. I think you should. I think counseling is good,
Mhm.
but I don't know that the approach is always beneficial to a lot of people because either they're so self-focused in that they
Mhm.
can't see what they're doing to other people, or then they begin to blame shift. I know in corporate culture
Mhm.
a lot of people tend to pass the buck, right? They're like,
Mhm.
oh well, this is late because this person didn't do this and this person didn't do that. Well, did you remind them? Did you take any
Right.
initiative? Were you proactive about it? Like, what did you do? What did you do in this situation? What part of the situation do you own? And it starts from being very young, and I think it is incumbent on us as their fathers to teach them that you have to have some accountability. There
Yeah.
has to be accountability starting with your behavior, your actions, your thoughts, and then go outward. Don't start outward and say, oh, this person made me do this. No,
Right.
no one can make you do something that you don't want to do.
Well, it's interesting because consequence is stated to be a result of an action.
Hmm.
And when from probably too little, my oldest, like I would get to talking about consequences. Hey, if you
Yes. Yeah.
do something, something will happen because of that. So there's
Yes.
going to be good consequence or bad consequence,
Right.
but there's always a consequence.
Yes.
And she's grown up like that, relatively sticking to that. Like she knows that there's going to be consequences for the things that she does, good or
Yeah.
bad,
Yeah.
and she has to own them. And the hard part is owning the bad consequence, because the easy part is owning the good consequence, right? I did
Right.
this. This is what I did. Like
Look
let me
at
show you.
me. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But as soon as there's a negative consequence, the easy button is, oh, it's because of
Right.
X, right?
Right. Right.
Something else. And
Right.
although there is circumstances, right, that could lead to things
Mhm.
in training, like you have to plan for the weather, which is
Right.
crazy to say because I don't control the weather. You have to plan for a contingency in the event that the weather changes or that this happens. And if you didn't and you fail whatever you're doing, the question is, well, why didn't you plan for that? Because
Right.
that's the only
Right.
thing you can control is the planning action of that. Everything else is non-consequential. It's just it is what it is.
Right.
And again, that may be a little extreme, right? And we're in a different environment in the military, but that's kind of the approach I've taken with my daughters. Like, well, no, you're not blaming this kid. You're not blaming, especially when it's inanimate objects. I love that. Oh, it fell. I'm like, it fell. It just like jumped off the table and fell.
Right. Right.
And I
Right.
make
Right.
them say it. I'm like,
Yeah.
or did you drop it? Because it could be an
Exactly.
accident. It's no big deal.
Exactly.
But did you
Right.
drop it or did it fall? And
Right.
so
Right.
the language is important
Sure. For
because
sure.
a lamp doesn't just fall over. It's not how it works. Pending, an earthquake, it's not how it works.
Right.
So I make them say the thing. They'll say something like, "Oh, my sister got hurt." Come on, and they'll be like, "Well, I accidentally hurt her." Okay,
Mhm.
that's what you need to say. Don't come and tell me that she randomly got hurt for no reason, and I can
Right.
see you guys are playing around. It doesn't have to come with them getting in trouble every time, which is important, I think, because if that's the case, that's when we start creating that scapegoat, right? Like, oh, I
Yeah.
every time I do something, I'm going to get in trouble.
Mhm.
And no, you just have to be honest. I
Yeah.
did this accidentally, or this is the result. I'm sorry, I'll fix it. But owning that result, owning the consequence
Right.
that comes off of that. We got to a point where with my daughter where she would quickly own it. Oh, that's my fault. Okay. Well, there's still a consequence. You know that, right? Like just because you said it doesn't mean the consequence goes away. And we
Right.
see that
Right.
in this. We see this in the adult world, right?
Yes.
Like, oh
Yes.
well, I'll just
Yes.
be honest, and it was me. It's like, okay, cool. There's still a consequence to what you did.
Right.
That doesn't go away. You have to own all of that, and with my daughters, I've seen that where they're like, oh, if I just own it, meaning I just say it was me, because they're not, it's not a forced interrogation. I don't make them say things that are not true.
Right.
But for them to admit something happened, then they think that's it. Like it's stopped. Like, no, you straight up punch your sister in the face. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Right. Right.
Thank you for owning it. Now let's talk about your consequence. But wait,
Right.
I already owned it. Like, yeah, I know that's comes with a consequence.
And then it's how they own it, right? Because
Yeah,
we were talking about this too. Like, don't own it in tears because you think the tears are going to lessen now the offense, right? You're
yeah,
crying, and I'm like, what are we crying for right now, though? What do you know? And I'm very kind of blunt with my girls at that point because I want them to know that I'm not trying to I'm not trying to soften all of these things for you. I want to put them in this proper context. If you have done something that is bad, crying your way out of it is not
yeah,
the solution.
yeah,
And I don't want them to use those kind of tactics just because they are girls to try to get out of being accountable for their actions. I think that sets a poor example and it does them a disservice. They're like, oh, just because I'm a girl, I can't, I'm crying. You have to feel sorry for me. And
yeah,
like, don't hold me accountable because, I'm crying right now. No, no, you are a person. You committed this against another person.
yeah,
Okay. This is your sister or this is another child or another kid. And you crying your way out of it is not going to work for me, you
yeah.
know?
Well, is it always crying the way out of it, or is crying the expression of their perceived pain? Think about it, because we always suffer more in thought than in action, right? So, like,
Right,
the more and more they think about how they may be getting in trouble, that's the fear that, like, my daughters do this all the time.
right.
They
But,
they
but no,
they
no,
will,
no.
like, they will cry about things that aren't even at their doorstep yet because they're perceiving this, like, discomfort, this whatever, and I'm not even talking about just consequential things, I'm just in general. And
Yeah.
so I I perceive that as the crying is just their expression of fear for whatever is coming, even though they don't need to.
Yeah. Maybe
It's kind of like
sometimes.
it's kind of like getting a shot. Like, like
Right.
your kid is like bawling their eyes out before the
Yeah.
shot comes in. Then the shot goes, and they're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like they suffered 100 times more in their brain than they did in the actual action of getting
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
vaccination.
I can almost get with that sometimes, but majority of the time, no. They're trying to scapegoat it. You want me to feel worse for you.
Mm,
So then it's a form of blame shifting, really. It's like, oh, now I need to feel bad for you for this act. Because then when I say, oh, you're not in trouble, the tears dry up. Or the tears aren't even crying.
right.
Your
There's
face
no
is
tears coming
dry.
out. Yeah.
You're just like, okay, but where are the tears? You're crying,
Right.
but where are the tears? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So that's when I'm like, you're trying to
That's
play me right now.
our youngest is, man, that girl, so manipulative, man. Like, gotta figure her out because you're right. Like that's a manipulative action, right?
Yeah.
That's a manipulative tendency that we don't want to um, grow in our
Nurture,
girls,
absolutely
right? We don't
not,
want to nurture that because it's not good. It's just not. That's
because we
not the
see
person that
adults
you
who
want to
do
be.
that. Adults who do that. You're breaking
Absolutely
down after, "I'm having a hard time at work," and then you cry.
right.
Whoa. I mean, having a hard time at home, and then you're crying, you're in tears at a presentation. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but that doesn't mean you didn't do good well in the presentation. You didn't submit all the facts. You didn't do the research, but now you're crying to get out of it. Doesn't help you. That's not.
It doesn't, but yeah, that happens.
Yeah. And
But again,
and
I don't know. We only see what you were mentioning earlier, essentially the iceberg effect, right? Like you only see the top.
yep.
Like we
Yep.
don't know
Yep.
the 90% of the bottom. What
We do
what
not.
that's what's that showing? And the only problem with that is if you're not able to maybe differentiate between other things that are at the bottom, and they
Mhm.
always come, if they're always coming out on top, like that's, like you said, that's the person you are now. Like
Yep.
even if
Yep.
you do have all these negative factors that are going on outside of the light of people, if you're not working on those and you're continually like doing these other things, kind of like that scholar that's constantly doing these things. Like that's who you are now to people. Like,
Yeah.
it sucks that you might have some other things going on, but now this is who you are to people. Like, there's no way to get around it because actions speak louder than words, right? So this is what comes out.
Yeah. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. He talks about us creating and nurturing amiable children, agreeable children that begin to charm adults, not in some kind of manipulative way,
Right,
but in a way that your children bring the best out of other children and
right,
other adults. And I think there's something to that, man. I
yeah,
think there's something to like kids standing firm and confident in who they are, but they're not troublemakers, they're not smart mouths, they are respectful, they are kind,
hmm,
and they are principled. You know, they're young and they have values that have
hmm,
been set into them, and then by definition people then associate them with those things. They
right,
begin to associate them with being kind and respect. Man, that's a respectful child, or that's a well-mannered child. So being labeled well-mannered versus being labeled the disruptive bully is going to get you a lot more out. It's going to get you a
absolutely,
lot more good consequences than bad consequences.
right. And I think it's important to note too that on that aspect, the way that we go about that is crucially important
Yeah.
because you know I was a respectful kid, but I was also terrified my dad was not going
Mm.
to be happy if I wasn't,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
It was never I wasn't getting beat or anything, but it's like leading with fear or leading with respect and
Yes.
love with our
Yes.
girls
Yes.
particularly.
Right.
Absolutely holding the line, but then making sure that they know why it's important to do these things. And then also that we are emulating what we're trying to say because as we
For
know,
sure.
monkey see, monkey do, right?
Right,
The
right,
saying
right,
doesn't go
right.
monkey see, then monkey gets told and then he does it. Like that's not how it goes. They see us do it, and no matter what words came out of our mouth, they're gonna do what they see done. That's just
Right,
it's just the way it goes, and that's the
right.
hardest thing I've had to think through as a father. I want my kids to do certain things, but then if I'm not emulating that, and be it known, like we're under a microscope
We
all
are.
the time. The kids are always watching. So how my emotional self comes across, how I'm dealing with problems, how I do everything is how they are going to do everything at least up front because we know they're going to grow and become their own. But up front, that's their training. That's what they're looking at.
And again, that's why we chose, the three things that we chose when we were trying to cultivate this community on this podcast, right? We want parents and we want fathers to be strong, present, and mindful. Mindful.
Absolutely.
You got to be mindful of your actions. You can't
Yeah.
just go in here being reckless and thinking that you can say and do anything
Right.
with your girls and then they're just going to come out, on the other spectrum.
Right.
What's the saying? And like an apple tree doesn't produce oranges, right? Like
Right.
it's just not going to happen.
Right.
You have to be, if you want an orange, you need to be an orange, right?
Right.
That's what happens. We have to be the leaders and the examples of what we would want to see in our children.
And we talked a little bit about that before, where they're little mirrors.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's maybe funny to say it this way, but they are a consequence of you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Our children are
Oof,
consequences of us and what we
oof.
do.
That
And
hit
so,
different. That
right?
hits different when you
Because
say it like that.
man, I met some kids that I'm like, what the heck? And then I meet a parent, I'm like, oh, right. I'm not even judging. I'm just saying there's similarities. They're a
Yes.
consequence of what they see us
Yeah.
do. And so it's crucially important that we are mindful of what we're doing, how we come across to them, but be strong and hold that line, right? Give them
Yeah.
those values that we value, and then more importantly, emulate those same values.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, man, you have anything else for us on this topic?
No, man, I think that wrapped it up. We want our fathers, our dad homies on here in this community to be strong, present, and mindful. That is the message.
Yeah.
And if you have that, then there will yield accountability. There will yield like this this self-reliance, this will yield people who take responsibility for their actions and don't blame shift. And
Right.
ultimately, once you begin to take responsibility for your actions, you can be an agent of change and transformation.
Awesome, man. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. We always appreciate your support. We ask more support. Please leave us a review. Send us any feedback that you have to conversations@daughterpodcast.com. You can also find us at daughterpodcast.com. You have all of our social media stuff and how to get a hold of us. Like I mentioned, the support that you guys provide literally keeps this thing going and allows Blandon and I to continue to learn from all of you. So thank you so much for that. And we look forward to the next one. Until then, I'm Oscar, Blandon on the other side. We'll see y'all later.